What do you do when somebody just will not stop talking? They're like blah 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 blah, and you're like actually, and they just keep on going. It gets more and more intense. You're trying to find a moment where you can say something, and there is no moment because they just keep on going. And the moment that they notice that you're trying to say something, they interrupt you again, and they just get louder and they get more intense. And it's like a dog with a bone, you know, they're so afraid that you're going to take away their talking space. It's just like, argh. What do you do, right? If you know someone a little bit better, right? So this is not just a very vague acquaintance, but it's somebody you actually speak to regularly. You might try talking to them about this, you know, you might try to bring it up and be like, hey, you know, I've noticed like when you talk, it's really hard for me to get a word in edgewise and you know, be honest about how it's affecting you. It's worth a shot, right? I always think like these kinds of conversations, even though they can be really awkward, are worth a shot because it's worth trying to be honest with someone. I always advocate, try the honest way first. Try to be really straight with somebody first. Because then if that doesn't work, okay, so then you're gonna have to try something that's a little more sly, that's a little bit more you know, avoidant. But I really recommend this because you might be pleasantly surprised. You know, there might be people who just don't realize, or they know that they do this sometimes. And they're like, yeah, if I do this, just tell me to stop and interrupt me. Like, you never know, like, right? So don't make assumptions about the person and just really try to bring it up with them first. That's what I would recommend. Also, because I really think that makes the world a better place, right? If we're just kind of honest with each other, not blunt and mean, but honest about like, hey, this is how this is, you know, affecting me, and this is how this is going, and how this is working. And especially if it's a pattern, not if it's a one-time thing. Like if it's a one-time thing, like just leave it, right? But if it's a pattern and it's someone's repeatedly, endlessly, blah, 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 you know, they may not realize, oddly enough, they may not realize, or they may realize, but they don't quite realize. Worth a shot. But what if you do that and it has no impact whatsoever? Maybe the person took it really well. They say they'll try to take, you know, they say they'll try to pay attention to that and not do it again, but they just keep doing it and nothing you do helps. Okay. So then it's really important to pay attention to your body language. If your body language is like, then you're acknowledging and giving them confirmation, and you're encouraging them to keep going, right? Or if you're turned towards the person, they're talking at you, they won't stop, and you're like, oh, I want to get away, but you're like this, right? You're like completely open, and your body language is saying like, I will stay here, I'll stand here and listen to you. I want to start turning away, right? So you want to start looking at your own body language, because what can happen is that you start to feel like a deer in headlights. You're just like, frozen to the spot, and inside you're like, I want to get away, but your outside body language is saying, just keep talking at me, and you keep going like because part of you hopes, if I'm just nice enough, maybe they'll stop. But you know, some people, they don't stop, they just keep going, and then you become the go-to talk to and talk at person. Actually, it's talking at, because talking to is different, right? Talking to is when you acknowledge the other person, there's some kind of two-way street going. When somebody talks at you, it's almost like you don't exist anymore, which is why this is actually a really important loop to get out of, because it can make you feel really, really dismissed and worthless and completely unloved in that moment in ways you may not even realize, but it's because you're being used as something to talk at. You're not being acknowledged as a human being with feelings and their own ideas and their own experiences in that moment. You're just being used for someone to kind of like dump their anxiety onto. Okay, so the thing is, there are strategies to get out of this, but the hardest part is that to use those strategies, you will have to become very aware of what is going on with you inside in the moment, right? So when you're in this situation and you're like, I want to get out, and they keep talking, stop worrying about them and practice turning inwards, noticing, what am I feeling? Why is it so hard for me to move or to just walk away? Like, what's going on with me right now? Because there's going to be two things that come up. One is, just all kinds of feelings that you probably do not realize you're having. And the second thing is all kinds of rules about politeness, right? But this is why I said, like, first then try telling them what's really going on, or try to have a conversation about it with them first, because the next step is just going to be try to get out of it any way that you can. And it's going to break some social protocols. It's going to be impolite, right? Because the next thing you got to do, if they are not responsive and if you can't get a word in and you try talking to them about it and they're not changing their way of doing things, is you just got to get out of there, which means turning away. It means ignoring what they're saying. It means just walking off in the middle of a conversation. It means just just blatantly talking, like somebody else joins the group and you just start talking to them, right? It's really rude. But the thing is, when someone's that rude with you and they just keep going and they're so oblivious to what they're doing, they're in this like, almost like they're in this trance, you know, you got to break the trance. And it's going to be rude because there is no polite way to do it. If there was, you would have found it already, right? And so then what you're up against is your own feelings and your own beliefs about what is acceptable and what is not. So this is really an inner job. And so the next step is just to start paying attention to what is happening inside of you and start to really notice, what are all the feelings that are coming up for you? What are all the memories that are coming up? Because chances are you've been in this situation before. This person may remind you of someone. Maybe you had a parent like this. Maybe you had a sibling like this. Maybe you had a friend like this way back when, right? So it can bring up a lot of inner stuff. And your job from that point onwards is to get acquainted with yourself, with the part of you inside that's struggling and that's frustrated and that's feeling scared and that's feeling overwhelmed. Get to know her, be present with her, and start to notice, you know, what am I up against? And start to work with those feelings, start to notice and be present with and give space to those feelings. Obviously not all in that moment, but you know, when you're back home in a quiet spot or something, start noticing like, oh yeah, I had all this fear come up or all this sense of obligation. Like, where is that in my body? Can I give that? Can I just be with that more? Can I give that some space to be, you know, and just notice what that's really about. A little pro tip. All the things you're going to be struggling with in terms of boundaries and, you know, dealing with difficult situations, it's not about, oh, you just need a smarter strategy. You know, like you probably have all the strategies already. You already know what you ideally could do. You could brainstorm a list of ideas of what you could do. What makes it hard is that in the moment, emotionally, you're feeling stuck, but you probably don't realize it's just this overall sense of like, you know, so in order to break out of that, it takes inner work, and you're probably going to have to let go of some, you know, dearly held beliefs and attitudes. Something like, if you're convinced that it's wrong to ever interrupt anybody, you're like, I will never interrupt anybody. Well, these people will just kind of, you know, bring that out of you. If you're convinced that it's just incredibly rude and mean to walk away from a conversation in the middle of it, and you're like, I would never do that. Well, you know, this is going to challenge you. So, you know, these situations come into our lives sometimes because it's time to let go of some dearly held protocols of, you know, how we should deal with other people and how we should always behave, and also often some old pain, you know, things that happened in the past where that kept going. And there's something very interesting about this dynamic of someone who just keeps on talking as if you don't exist. It's essentially, you know, when it's a pattern, not when it happens once, not when it's like, you know, someone just went through a really horrible situation and they're freaked out and they're just like, ah, and then the next day they're like, I'm sorry, I was just talking at you and I was just completely losing it. That's fine, you know, that's just human. But if this is a pattern, you start to notice, maybe the first time you think, oh, they must be really stressed out, and that's okay. And the second time you think, they must be really stressed out again. And then the third time in a week, you think, are they really this stressed out again? And then the fourth time, you're like, I think this is a pattern, right? Then what you're dealing with is essentially a kind of narcissism where the other person does not see and value and acknowledge you at all. And they're just using you as a place to dump their anxiety, as a place to just dump their ideas. And so this is going to bring up everything related to narcissism that you've experienced in your life, all the places that you feel stuck about this, and you feel like, oh, I can't move, because there's often really deep, if you've experienced as a kid, if you had narcissists in your environment growing up who had a really strong influence on you, had power over you, there's going to be some really, really deep childhood stuff around this, fears of, I can't go against them, feeling really powerless in that interaction, feeling really weak, and feeling really just kind of numb and floppy, and like there's nothing you can do, and almost like you're just wanting to please can I convince this person to stop? Like, please, how can I make them feel better so they stop doing this? And it becomes all about this other person. How do you somehow make them behave nicer to you? Right? That's a codependent narcissist dynamic, where you're like, what do I need to do so that they feel better, so that they're nicer to me? Right? And that's a really, really draining, unhealthy dynamic. And so when it comes up in a situation like that, it's something to pay attention to and realize, oh, okay, that's what this is. And there's many, 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 many layers to it. And this is like a pop quiz. Like, how far are you with disentangling yourself from these kinds of dynamics? Do you have the tools? Do you have the skills? Do you have the know-how to deal with this and to peel away the layers inside of what is going on here, what is getting triggered? Because stuff is getting triggered, right? That's why these people get away with it, why they can just talk at you for an hour and you're just like not moving. You're just like, wow, that really sucks. I'm so sorry for you. You just stay there, and all your own needs and your own program, like whatever you wanted to do, goes out the window. You're just like, I just gotta, like, I hope they're okay. I gotta make them feel better. When are they gonna stop? That's the deer in headlights codependence of being faced with a narcissist who to you feels really strong and powerful and imposing. And so, as an adult, when this happens to you and you feel that way, there's a childhood dynamic underneath. There's a little child inside of you who feels like, uh-oh, this is just like when I was a kid, and now this big scary adult is doing this again, and I have to somehow please them and to get out of this, right? That's the pattern you have to break. And so breaking the pattern is going to involve not pleasing them, not worrying about if they, whether they like you, if they're mad at you, if they, lash out at you. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you start respecting yourself, looking after yourself in that moment, giving yourself what you need, getting out of the situation, and just really setting those boundaries that you were never allowed to have, right? So it's a new thing. It's a new thing. And I can say all this because if you didn't have this going on, then in a situation like that where somebody keeps talking at you, you would not be struggling with it. You would have found a way out already. You would have had some way of saying, oh, they're just self-absorbed, like moving on. And you just get out, or you're somehow able to even like overpower them and talk over them somehow. Some people can do this, right? That person who is so talking at you and you can't stop them, there will always be someone else who can get them to shut up, who can get them to listen to them. I'm not saying you have to be like that person, because chances are they're even worse, because it's like, but I'm just saying it's not that they cannot be made to be quiet or to listen or to just, but there's something in that dynamic that they're picking up on as well that you're open to. You're open to that role of being the audience and just sitting back and letting them run the show, and you're just sitting there to watch. And they're on the stage, they're doing their thing, and they decide when it ends, right? And if you get up in the middle of the show, it's rude, and you're not allowed to do that. That's kind of the game that you're in. Okay, so, the strategies for getting out are simple. It's that you turn your body away from the conversation. You start looking somewhere else. You start looking away from the person. Don't stop looking at them. Stop looking them in the eye. Just start looking somewhere else. Start looking for something else to do. Start looking for somewhere to go. Start looking for an excuse. This is a good time to look for an excuse, especially if you've actually had a conversation with them, or if there's someone that you barely know, right? Sorry, gotta go, gotta do this, gotta do that, gotta go to the bathroom, I don't know, whatever it is. But you got to pull yourself away from that whole dynamic. And then the emotions that you feel, that's what's coming, that's what's really holding you in place. It's not the other person. It's how they make you feel that's keeping you nailed to the ground. And so you got to know how to identify, acknowledge, and work through that, and how to get out of those codependent narcissist patterns, right? And if you've got ways to do that, that's great. Use them, right? So really in that situation, start noticing what's happening inside of you. Start becoming really aware, one step at a time, because it's not going to be like flipping a switch and suddenly you see everything. You're just going to become incrementally a little bit more aware of like, oh, I'm feeling this. And then in my stomach, this is happening. And then I'm thinking in my head, and then that, and then that. And you start to piece together what is actually going on the inside. But piecing it together and knowing it is not enough, right? Like if you have real healing tools, you know that. You got it. Really be with the feelings, work through them, identify any limiting beliefs, let those go, check if there's any kind of energy cords with people that are relevant, that are coming up, all that kind of stuff. If you don't have any tools, you're like, this is the kind of stuff that I can teach you in No to Narcissist, my program for working on these kinds of like icky interactions where you're dealing with a narcissist and you just kind of you're like deer in headlights, or you have some strategies, but they're not really working, or it's leaving you really frazzled. Like, how do you unravel that so that you can become calm and cool and collected in the face of these kinds of situations? I'm putting the link below if that's something that you're interested in. I hope this was helpful for you, and I hope you don't meet too many people like this who just like wah, 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 at you, because it's not fun. But then again, this is the universe's way of giving you a pop quiz and saying, have you dealt with this? Can you get out of this? Because when you can get out of it easily, this will stop happening to you. Oh, it's always like this. When something's a problem and you really can't handle it and you're afraid, you're like, I hope this doesn't happen. It keeps happening, because this is your pop quizzes all over again. But then if you can actually handle it, if you pass the quiz, you stop getting the quiz, It might happen once or twice, but then it'll be like a little blip, won't be a big deal. That's the thing. When this keeps happening to you, there's something to learn here. There's something to unravel. All right, this was Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.